with regards to the structural things, the technicalities of drawing, and that obviously comes from the right-hand side, the left-hand side of the mind.
Yeah.
The other stuff comes from a space of no mind. Okay, so
Okay.
it comes once it's downloaded, of course, from one's intuition, from one's spirit, from one's soul. Because once you got your technical part of your practice to a certain degree, some of the other creative stuff comes from a space of no mind.
Welcome to the Conscious Rebel Podcast with your host, Lucy Morningstar.
Hi, Bonny.
Hi, Lucy.
It's a great pleasure to meet you in person. Not in person,
and you
over
too.
Zoom.
And you too.
Yeah,
Just amazing.
When Kat introduced me to your work, and I was very amazed by your work. And you are so multi-talented. You did film, and you write poetry. Do you write music too?
No, I don't. My partner's a musician, but no, that I don't write music. I do a little bit of drumming and a little bit of flute, but I'm definitely not a musician.
I saw the film that you did about, was it about God, about who I am, yesterday?
Yes.
And that's really amazing. And I really recommend everyone to look at that. It's really amazing. You have a short film at the beginning, right? And it was beautifully written, beautifully, the video is beautiful. And then you, after the short film, you went on to explain the science and the quantum physics and everything about existence, I guess, the idea of God and everything. And it's like you summarized your research or study from many different sources in that video.
Yes. It's about, the God particle. I think quantum physics is almost like the bridge between spirituality and the natural world. It's a little bit more tangible for people. So it was a little bit more of a tangible aspect of what God is.
Yeah.
In terms of science, quantum physics. And I think that, if we can, somehow figure that out to at least to some degree, and connect to nature and connect to the great creator, a lot of people won't be so lost, because I think there's quite a lot of lost people at the moment.
There are. And I find it very hard to actually figure out. So if you can tell us like that part of your video, so what is God from what you understand?
Look, from a quantum physics perspective, in a nutshell, it is the God particle. There's this particle that quantum physicists have discovered, and people have also known about it for thousands of years as well, the ancients, that is in every single living being, which also makes us connected to everything, and everything that happens to us also goes into the collective. So it's a bit of a, it goes with and it goes against some of the more common New Age philosophies. In the New Age movement, they often say, "Oh, you be happy, and then everybody else will be happy." But there's a bit of a contradiction there, because it also, if the other people aren't happy, it affects you as well.
Yes, definitely.
So you can't just be in this little bubble and then make sure just you are happy and then your vibe spreads out. It is actually our responsibility to assist and help other people as well. Because if everybody went by New Age philosophy, there would be no charities or no people helping other people, or people facing the darkness in order to assist other people. So I have a liking and a disliking of a lot of the New Age philosophies, for a start.
Yeah, I think this is, there's so much different contradicting information, right? And as we dig more into what is really going on in the world and all that kind of things, can't help but start wondering, well, is New Age another kind of thing made, as much as other religions that orchestrated, reinvented by, what do we call, the evildoers or the whatever, as another way to control and manipulate, us.
Yes, well, they do say the New Age movement is the last cul-de-sac before the gold mine, meaning it's the last thing that turns people around before they hit enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it. The New Age, and a lot of the main New Age philosophies actually line up with the Satanic, the primary Satanic philosophies. They just word it a little bit different. And if one looks at the New Age movement, how it was founded, it was founded through the Theosophical Society, and it was actually set up to capture those people who are the most sort of spiritual. And they do say that the best way of manipulation is to tell a 80 or 90% truth. So there is a lot of manipulation. I mean, there's a lot of truth there, but then there's those bits, on the side, on the periphery, that that turn you.
Yes, that is the thing. There's you like that's why it's so hard to actually figure out, like, what is the actual what is actually the universal truth, right? What is true? Because it's like you say, the New Age, or probably a lot of things, a lot of people that are out there, they kind of have a lot of traction, and especially for people who are seeking alternative information from the media, right? They're seeking alternatives. It's very easy to be attracted into something that is probably 90% truth, but then what they don't tell you is what is so hard to figure out.
Look, it is very hard to figure out. And what you also just said there about trying to figure out what is the truth, one of the New Age sort of philosophies, for want of a better word, is that you have your own truth, you have your own perspective, your truth is your truth.
I find that to be so BS.
Exactly. That is actually one of the Satanic philosophies as well. And that basically allows anything.
Exactly. Look at what's happening now. Anytime if you just say man can't be a woman, and then they will, and that is, and this, and people say that is not true. Like, this is your truth, but not my truth. Oh my God, it's just total bullshit. And there's just a lot of this going on, and people using, this is my truth, like your truth, my truth, that kind of things should just be totally live in total delusions, and they force you to conform to their delusion. Like, this just, I mean, that is just one obvious, like, this is so obvious, one obvious bullshit. Unfortunately, people just still fall for that.
Exactly. And talking about bullshit, the New Age Bullshit Conference, which was run by an ex-Satanist called Mark Passio, his information is very, very interesting as well, where he also correlates a lot of the New Age movement and philosophies with the Satanic, how similar it is. And he's one of the many people who explains that there is actually something as a fundamental truth, truth in the universe. There is a truth, and it's not your truth, my truth. I can do this and that because it's their truth. So yeah, that's just quite interesting. Yeah.
Okay, you know what? Before we go too much into this rabbit hole, and I know you have your art around that, so just tell us what inspires you, your art. Like, does any of this that we're talking about, because it seems like your art has, something to do with that too, or probably how you see the world. So tell us, like, what inspires your art nowadays.
I have different categories.
Yeah.
Look, I did have my sort of conspiracy, sort of Alice in Wonderland category of art. And then I also paint quite a lot of pagan sort of stuff. A lot of people, have no clue about what paganism sort of is. It's the religion, in my opinion, not that I think anybody needs a religion, but it's a religion that is the closest to nature. And that is, nature is where I think is the closest frequency to the great prime creator, natural in nature. And it's also just about observing the natural cycles of life, reflected in the cycles of nature as well. And I mean, one thing that people also don't understand sometimes is, I mean, there's two different, quite in their essence, quite different religions who both have witches. Of course, there's the Satanists that have witches. And then, of course, there's the pagans that had witches. The pagan witches were more like, in the old days, there were no, before the days of the church and that, there were only the witches who were the healers and helped with the birthing of the babies and helped with spiritual guidance and all. They only had the witches. And of course, when the church came, they had to try and wipe them all out because they wanted to take over. But it was quite interesting. I had an art student who wrote a book on some of this stuff. And she was explaining the history of when the church came and the medicines came, how many women died in childbirth. Because the witches had, thousands of years of practice in these things and inside knowledge. But of course, so you don't hear about them. You mainly hear about the Satanic witches, which of course is
so
mainly...
I want to ask you, was it fair to say that the pagan witches that you mean are actually more traditional ancient medicine practitioners?
Absolutely. They are. First, let me start by saying that there is no religion on earth and no group, that's a large group that has not been infiltrated by Satanism. So you will see Satanism even in Christianity, especially Catholicism. You'll see it everywhere. So let me just start by saying that.
Okay.
But in its essence, it has nothing to do with Satanism. In its essence, they were the original witches were the shamans of Europe. So, you had your shamans and your medicine people all over the world. And they were just the shamans of Europe. And,
Okay.
and their legacies go back obviously thousands of years, the same as the medicine people from every other culture across the world, which were also met a similar fate in many instances than the witches did.
Yeah, it's the similar fate as in being infiltrated by Satanism, or do you mean being the modern medicine and the churches come and wipe them out?
All of the above.
Okay.
All of the above. And then, of course, everything is inverted, because I mean, that's the main satanic thing, is to invert everything. And of course, for example, with the pagan pentagram, the main point points up to the sky, to spirit. And then, of course, with the satanic pentagram, it points down because it's all about matter. And satisfying your earthly desires, and materialism and all that kind of thing.
Then if you go into any kind of religion, paganism or Christianity, to make sure that you don't fall into these kind of traps, I guess.
Firstly, I'll just go back to something you said earlier about atheists being interested in paganism. So obviously, paganism is a very, very large umbrella. It's a large umbrella, and there's a whole bunch of different sort of different beliefs: Druidism, paganism under that umbrella.
Mm.
But generally, atheists don't believe in a God, whereas obviously pagans, we believe, generally speaking, in Mother Earth, Father Sky. So the two are not really very compatible.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but a lot of atheists, you'd be surprised that they believe in crystals and all all that kind of thing. Then that kind of defies the idea of atheism. You believe you pray to crystal, your whole crystals, and emanate some energies and assist you in things like. So like I say, atheism isn't even pure atheism anymore. Like from what I see.
Look, fair enough. But also the crystal thing can be, some of it can be proven with science, because that could be also a bit more of a scientific reasons why they might be using crystals.
Okay.
But with regards to your other question about all this confusion.
Yeah.
I mean, I do agree with you. Personally, I do believe this planet has been infiltrated by negative forces, which obviously we won't go into here. But one of the first things these negative forces do when they infiltrate a planet is they manipulate, obviously, the sacred texts of a planet, and distort the sacred texts. So what we do have now is really, in all religions, in my perspective, is a very distorted version of the original essence. And I mean, you're right. I mean, generally speaking, I don't think one really needs a religion. You're probably better off just communicating yourself with the great creator, or prime creator. You don't, but for me, paganism is just about seeing, as I said, prime creator in nature. And with the herb, I mean, my sort of religion is the tree that's standing right there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the tree.
And seeing these cycles, and I mean, some of it might actually also be past life stuff for me. Having been part of that kind of stuff in past lives as well, bringing that through. And also, I mean, a lot, it goes back so far. So, in an essence, probably better off just sitting in silence, meditating and downloading the essence of the truth.
But that can be a tricky thing too, because as you know, the negative forces, right, who's like currently ruling the world, right? I think one of their agenda or goal is to, like we also see in books like Brave New World and 1984, right? It's that the big brother, they want to create a society, and actually see that in history, for example, in China during the Cultural Revolution, and even now, right? They want to create what we'll probably call a godless society, because when people don't believe in a god or anything, they will believe in anything. Like when they don't have something to believe in, they believe in anything. It's very easy to control them with fear, and then create problem reaction solution, right? That kind of thing. So you see that happening right now in China, creating a godless society. You can see communism infiltrating the West as well. I'll just call it Americanized communism, right? So I find that to be a very thin ice to walk on too, because if people just have no God, like I don't believe in anything like that, and it's very easy for them to believe in the big brother, the deep state.
Look, I completely believe in a god or goddess, and I do believe that if people are not connected to that prime creator, society is lost. Now, whether one does that through a religion, look, some people, I guess, need that structure of that religions can provide, and that community that sense of community and identity that sometimes religions can provide. And I think the whole thing probably is about this, as you say, thin line or even a balance between still having that connection while not going obviously too extreme with the religions, because I do agree with you that the religions have been used to, they've definitely been used to manipulate society, you know, because they certainly infiltrated, you know, the religions and are moving them, you know, to create chaos and division and all that kind of thing. So it is quite a complex issue.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And also,
you know,
when you say sitting in meditation and feel connection or with, you know, spirit or whatever, and sometimes we could potentially be opening up to the negative forces. And how many people that actually think they are channeling or connecting to some, they think like the good, but actually probably they're actually connecting to the negative forces. They're pretending to be good, right?
Look, absolutely. I mean, I did study the paranormal for years and years, and many different aspects to the paranormal. And I don't like, for example, I would not touch a Ouija board in 1,000 years. Okay. But I do the pendulum and the tarot and I make it very specific that I'm only connecting to my higher self. And I make it very specific, you know, and keep it really simple. And a lot of the time, the spirit world is extremely deceptive. Like someone can turn up and pretend they're your dead grandmother when they're not your dead grandmother. You know, they some other spirit pretending. It is you're right. It is quite a dangerous game. There are some things you can say, you know, just to, you know, if one studies this kind of thing, some things you can say just to make sure that you're dealing with the essence of progressive beings. But you know, like saying for your highest and best good, and but generally I wouldn't touch it. You know, calling on all these beings. And look, that is one reason why the ancient witches and also other cultures as well used to create a type of a circle around them. They used to like cast a circle in very, very specific ways. So that when they're meditating or doing their spiritual practice, it's keeping their own energy inside the circle and it's keeping other energies outside the circle. And that is something that needs training and practice to do properly. You know, because sometimes if you're just sitting there and you do go blank, you know, with meditation, in some cases you can leave yourself open to be, because you know, those people that go astro traveling, they leave their body, that sometimes they come back and their body's occupied.
What?
You know, absolutely, because you're leaving an empty body, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So you've really got to know what you're doing.
Yeah. Very fortunately, I'm unable to do that unless I'm dreaming, probably in sleep.
Exactly. No, you've really got to know what you're doing, you know, when you know, engage in some of these practices. Because it is difficult to keep once the entities are everywhere. There's even been books written by medical doctors about entities that cause diseases in people.
Yeah.
And they're just everywhere, and you pick them up everywhere, and then there are negative spirits everywhere, and it is a little bit of a tricky thing.
You know, I think the things that feel outright negative, that's all right, but the more deceptive one are the ones that pretend to be from like a higher consciousness, or you know what the new age terms, like whatever other like just celestial, like a higher consciousness collectives and all the kind of things, right? And they kind of come to you to share wisdom. But they probably are not what like higher consciousness. They are probably pretending to be, but actually are not. But anyway, that's like a whole another rabbit hole.
Lucy, just on that note, one of the experts in that particular field, his name is Cameron Day, and he talks about how you have the darkness is divided into two sides. It's the darkness and the false light. So there are lots of beings in the false light who pretend, like a lot of these, beings people worship and who appear to be wonderful, beautiful, caring beings and gods and goddesses and all the rest of it, but they come from the false light.
Yeah. Whatever I think about the false light, the darkness and the false light, I think of in Harry Potter, I think Professor Umbridge, or I think that's her name. She's a pink and love cute kitties, but she's so evil. That's the person that comes to mind. She's white.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Pink, right? Anyway, I want to go back to your art because this is such a big rabbit hole. We can go on forever talking about it. I want to ask about your art, especially. Okay, to go back to the do you paint nowadays? Do you paint in oils or acrylics?
I have always painted in oils.
Okay.
Right now, I'm painting in watercolor. I'm painting the zodiac in watercolor. I do find watercolor quite difficult, especially when you spend years and years and years and years painting in oil, which is almost the opposite of watercolor.
Yeah, that's opposite.
Exactly. It's quite for someone who's so used to one medium, and that's one of the reasons why I'm painting in watercolor. Just for the challenge. And also the nice thing about watercolor is that it's so mobile. You can take it with you when you go on holiday. Yeah. Whereas oil is very difficult to travel with. Not that I'm planning to travel anywhere soon. But yeah. Oil paint's almost a little bit too, it almost feels a little bit too easy for me.
Oh.
Not that one can even say that.
Let me ask you not just about the medium. I'll look on some example, because your art is so rich in symbolism, and it's just so rich, right? It's not like my painting, for example. It's quite simple in terms of the composition and everything, right? But your painting's got so many elements, and so I want to ask about your creative process, right? So we talk about your pagan art before, the equinox, the solstice, the Sabbath, the wheel of the year project, for example. So for people who on the podcast, I will put up an example of your artwork, so then people can look at it while you explain to us how you start with the idea, how you decide on what symbolisms you use, and how you kind of construct them and compose them before we even go into your techniques, like the before you even put paint on canvas.
Okay, so most paintings are a different thing. Well, what I mean by one painting, the process for one painting is not the same as the process for the next painting or the next painting.
Okay.
But for example, with the pagan Sabbaths, the wheel of the year, that was very specific. I wanted to choose things that were very, very specific to that wheel of the year. Of course, the wheel of the year, for people that don't know, are like the solstices, the equinoxes, the 8 different turning points of the year.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot to do with also harvesting and sowing of the land.
Yeah.
And it's got to do with a lot of philosophies and cultures across Europe that corresponded with those dates.
Yeah.
Of course, the Satanists, of course, use those dates as well now, because they use everything from other. So starting with that, then you write down your points of the painting, and then you start to construct a picture. So I usually use, obviously 50% reference material, which is usually like a collage, for want of a better word, of about 20 or 30 different images. And then, of course, then the other 50% I make up, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. So let's be very specific. So
Yes.
like I'll just use one example. For example, let's use the one with Bridget's season. So that's called Inbok, right? Is that how I pronounce it? Yeah. So I can see there's a woman that's probably Bridget.
Mm-hmm.
And then those kind of crosses are Bridget's cross, right? All right. So tell me this, the one about Inbok. How do you start? So you have the idea you're gonna make a painting of the Inbok, and where do you go from there?
So the first thing I looked for was or created. So sometimes I photograph myself. And of course, as you know, we sometimes buy the photo. There's obviously photographs that they sell for reference material for artists.
Yeah.
As you know. But I often can't get the exact pose that I want. So I often just photograph myself. I've got a very good camera. So it's just a woman, you know, in a certain position. And then from that, I paint the clothes on her. I paint the hair on her. I usually change the face. So I just got a face of a profile from somewhere and slap that on.
Yeah.
And then of course the difficult thing about that painting was the composition. It really did my head in as to what I was going to put where. And I had quite difficulties with composition. And then the background in that painting with the trees, the tree, I actually painted several times. I didn't just paint once because I wasn't happy with the first. That's the beauty of oil paints, that you don't get in water. You don't have that luxury in watercolor. That's what makes watercolor, one of the things that makes watercolor quite difficult. Of course, with oil paint, you can move things around and change things and change the color and change this. So some of it I actually repainted quite a bit. I actually struggled more with that painting than all of the other Wheel of the Years paintings. That's a painting I struggled with the most. Like I didn't struggle with so much with some of the others. And then so the composition, and then obviously just looking at a few. Obviously, those paintings are very influenced by Art Nouveau, Art Nouveau style. So I just, look at a few Art Nouveau compositions. Just
so how do you even
ideas.
start to compose it?
Well, just putting, it's in my head.
So you already, so you already see the composition in your head, and you just need to, like, solidify it on paper. Like you already have it in your head.
Well, I find some of the reference material.
Yeah.
And this I'm going to put there, that I'm going to put there, that I'm going to put there, that, and the next thing I'm going to put there. And then once I've got the reference material, most of the composition is in my head. And then I just start, I just start pasting it onto the canvas, basically. In most cases anyway. Even with that Mad Hatter, I just thought, this I'm going to put there, that I'm going to put there, that I'm going to put there, the next thing I'm going to put there. And then I just put it onto
so can't do that. So you already have the idea of all. So you say, like, you have many different references, many different symbols and elements, right? The visual elements you want to put in, you like already organically have that formed in your head where you want to put what. So
exactly. However,
oh my God.
However, you can't do that with watercolor.
Yeah, I don't care about watercolor. I'm not interested in watercolor.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I just want to say, with watercolor, you have to have everything drawn out beforehand because there's no room for mistakes. With oil, a lot of the time you do the painting as you go along. You know what I mean? Because you can change things all the time.
Yeah, but it's still annoying to keep on changing it because the paint takes. I find that would probably be easier with acrylics because it dries so fast. You can just paint over it quickly. But with oil, it still takes time to dry. And then if I find something that I super don't like, I have to scrape it off or paint over. It's just not as just frustration still. But like, So this is, you know, because with your painting, right, they have a lot of things going on. It's not simple composition with just a few visual elements. There's a lot of visual elements going on, right? So it's amazing that you already have everything in your head, like the Mad Hatter one also. They're so rich in, you know, visual elements, visual language. You already have everything in your head.
Well, the thing is, let's just say I have 60 to 70% in my head, and the painting that I end up with might be different to the picture that I originally had in my head. And yeah, you know, that's basically it.
Okay, all right. You know, this is like one of the moment, this is one of the moment where you see some of the Instagram reels and people saying, I'll show you how to do a tutorial. First you draw a head and then boom, the camera drops. The next time they show is a finished beautiful painting. I feel like this. Because that's just how your brain works. Is that just how your brain works?
I mean, the paintings are quite busy. And just on another note, my style has changed quite a bit. My style used to be a bit more fine art. It used to be a bit more 3D. And it has turned a little bit more towards illustration. Illustration is a little bit flatter. Illustration prints better. Because of course the fine art model could potentially be slightly different to the illustration model, where the illustration model is where your original painting is just a blueprint for making prints and merchandise from. Whereas of course with fine art you try and sell the original, where you get paid more per hour. You know, whereas with illustration, in theory, there's no ceiling as to how much you can earn from a painting.
I find nowadays the line between the fine art and illustrations, at least in some aspects, has been blurred, because you know, there are many artists who you can say that's a beautiful fine art painting, but it sells so many prints too, you know. And they can also be illustration for some big projects like Magic the Gathering, right? That's a very popular game, right? And you'll be people who illustrate for that like fantastic, and they sell their paintings for, you know, 5-6 figures or regional painting, and they also do a lot of prints. So I think sometimes the line can be quite blurred, especially in like the fantasy art genre and the surrealism, that kind of things.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I mean, artists are crossing over to that, because of course there's the business model of illustration, and then there's the aesthetic model of illustration, as to the difference how an illustration looks versus how a, you know, more fine art sort of piece looks. And again, even with both, it is crossing over.
Yeah, I still want to find out how your brain works in terms of your paintings. Like, for example,
sure,
the Mad
ask me
Hatter
anything.
one. The Mad Hatter. Okay, so I will put the painting on the screen for people to look at. So the Mad Hatter, of course, we have the Mad Hatter here. There's some symbols that's you know, relatively easy for me to understand. Of course, the Mad Hatter is the main character, and then there's the cat. And then the rabbit hole at the bottom, and the Mad Hatter giving you a blue pill and a red pill. Like, these are relatively easier things for us to understand. So you have the cat as a cake, and the rabbit down there in a kind of machine, or a clock or whatever, in a machine kind of thing. His rabbit hole is like the machine clocks, that kind of stuff. So you already have the composition like that in your head, like not exactly, but big picture wise, you have the composition in your head before you start.
So for that one, I did have a little bit of a sketch on paper,
okay,
as to where it was a very loose sketch, not very detailed.
Yeah.
As to where I was going to place things. So I basically think, oh, I'm going to place that there. I'm going to place that there. I'm going to place that there. I'm going to put this here. It's just more ideas down. And then I just start adding it to the painting.
Okay.
I had to get the hands from somewhere. I had to get, obviously his coat is partly made up, and I put use stencils for a lot of things in that painting. I go to Linen Craft or wherever and buy stencils. And the face, you can see his face is a combination of different faces. If you look carefully, he's actually got Marilyn Monroe's nose. And then I got the, other features from other bits of his face. Some of it's made up, obviously out of my head, like the hair and stuff like that. Obviously the hands, you can't make up hands out of your head. So I got hands from somewhere, and then of course I just added those ruffles around the hands myself. And of course the ruffle around his neck was added from somewhere else. So it is really a bit like a collage.
So how do you decide? Because the Mad Hatter's hair, it's not just hair. This bubbles, circles, and things, like, what do they mean? Like, do they have a specific meanings to them? Like, and well, how do you come up with those patterns?
Some of it does, some of it doesn't. I mean, you've got to remember also with how the mind works. So art, of course, is the same as music. It's 50% in a sense mathematic and 50% creative. That's why they say art can balance the right and left hemispheres of the music. Of course, mathematics was the first music was the first mathematics ever devised. With regards to the structural things, the technicalities of drawing, and that obviously comes from the right-hand side, the left-hand side of the mind.
Yeah.
The other stuff comes from a space of no mind. Okay. So it comes once it's downloaded, of course, from one's intuition, from one's spirit, from one's soul. It's the same as when musicians are just jamming and they're not thinking and they're making stuff up out of their head. Because once you got your technical part of your practice to a certain degree, some of the other creative stuff comes from a space of no mind. So it's that combination. And that's why, like, all of the arts, music, dance, the whole lot, really can connect one to one's higher self and other realms.
Okay, so some of this, it just comes through you. You didn't even think too much about it.
Yes, some of it did. Yes. And just for the record, I don't use any drugs or anything. Some of the artists do, but I've never personally not touched the stuff myself. It doesn't resonate with me.
Some people do, either exotic mushrooms or whatever kind of thing to put them in a trance, and then they see things that help them with creating. I've know some people who do that.
Yeah, and that's their journey. But it is quite possible to have that access, without needing that, because it's a natural thing. It's your intuitive process.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about this then. What's your view about artists who actually do that? Like, they use kind of drugs to help them connect to something, and so that they see some visuals that can help them with the aura. What's your view on that?
Well, firstly, that's obviously a very extremely controversial topic. I'm a little bit anti-drugs myself, because I've lived in lots and lots of share houses, and I've been surrounded by it my whole life, and I've seen some pretty horrible things, and people ending up in psych wards and all kinds of things, and also people committing suicide, housemates of mine committing suicide because they took too much drugs, and then even just, you don't know how. And also I've seen quite a few people get schizophrenia because obviously they were prone to that in the first place, and then the drugs just set it off, or whatever it is.
Okay.
Everybody, and I've also been on panels, artist panels, where everybody's saying how much the drugs help them and that kind of thing, and then it comes to me, and then I'm saying,
So are we talking about the pharmaceutical artificial drugs, or including the magic mushrooms?
Look, I'm not talking about the magic mushrooms so much.
Okay.
I mean, and the ayahuasca, I know ayahuasca has helped people. It's actually helped people come off drugs. And I think the mushrooms have helped people a little bit. You know, maybe it, you know, has its own place. Obviously, it's a lot more natural than the pharmaceutical stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fine line as well. You know, but yeah, I just don't think people really need it. People, you know, you have the ability to access the stuff yourself. You know, it's almost like a lazy option.
Yeah, lazy option is easy option though, right?
It's a lazy easy option. And look, sometimes you don't know, sometimes you're playing a game, because some people are subject genetically to certain psychological problems if they take it. You know, and you don't know if how you're going to react to it sometimes. And I've just seen some awful things. Anyway, that's just yeah, obviously the harder drugs, that's another story.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
completely. Those are the doorway to hell, in my opinion. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents.
So how do you say, if you were to give us some advice, right? People who don't want to take those drugs, they want to be able to access what you call the intuition, or they want to be able to access those kind of things without taking the lazy way. What are some things that we can do to help us open up and be more receptive without using those outside substance?
Well, for example, the process of painting by itself, if you're doing it properly, you know, not the way some of these art schools show you how to paint, it's already slows down your brain waves. It already puts you in an alpha brainwave state. It already makes you focus on 2 things rather than 1,000 things per second. You know, if you're painting properly, you know, even from a technical point of view, you know, you just start with technical stuff. You know, you're painting the face, you're painting those eyelashes, you're painting those meticulous, you know, shadows and things. You know, you're focusing on this painting. That, as I said, already slows down your brainwave, okay, which already starts to give you access to the other side of your brain, which is the intuitive side of your brain. Same with music. You know, you're focusing just on those 3 notes, or that little, you know, little song, or you know, you really got to focus. And again, just that practice of playing, the practice of doing it already starts to put you in that state. Now, you're not in that state when you start your painting, which is sometimes why people don't feel like painting at the beginning.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's only after you've been painting for an hour that you're in the mood for painting.
Yes, totally.
You know what I mean? Because when you start, you're not in that meditative zone, in that creative zone.
No. Yeah.
And so, yeah, the practice itself opens up those aspects of yourself. And also, look, one of the most difficult, because I had an art school for 20 years, like I've taught thousands of people how to paint and draw from scratch over many years. And one of the most difficult things for people is to focus.
Yeah.
And it's gotten way worse. It's gotten way worse. People, you know, with all of the little bits of social media and little bits here and little bits there, people can't focus anymore, you know, and it's that practice of focusing on what, you know, because you usually have like 1,000 thoughts per second or whatever it is. And when you're painting properly, you have 3 thoughts per second. you know, if to focus properly. And that's and that's our problem. We just can't focus. And your focus is, of course, your God force. Your focus is where you put your divine energy. And your focus is your creation, you know. And when that might be one of the things they deliberately trying to do, is scatter people's ability to focus, which is their ability to create. So
yeah,
I mean, we now have the attention span of a goldfish, which is, I think, is about 3 seconds, whereas 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it wasn't that bad.
no, yeah, I got you. Yeah, so in one way, art actually saves us. Art can save us.
You get into this when you paint any of the arts, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You really get into the zone with all of the arts, dancing, music, all of it. It's one of our main spiritual connections, to even connect with yourself, and also to know who you are. Because when you're doing a painting, there's a bit of that painting that looks back at you. That's me. You know, I chose those colors. I chose that subject matter. You're going to make 1,000 choices. And all of that is little aspects of yourself.
Yeah. I do think, you know, nowadays when I really have a long time, like hours of focus, is when I'm painting. Like you say, at the beginning, I just have resistance to even start. But once I start, I have to set an alarm to let me know it's time to pick up the kids from school, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that this is probably the only time where I will have like hours of few thoughts going on in my brain.
And it can save you from depression. You know, because once you finish painting, there's something that happens that makes you, like, I don't know if it's endorphins or that connection just makes you feel much better.
Yeah, I think in one way, if the painting is have a lot of unresolved, like still in progress, unresolved, I feel like, oh, I have to work on it. It's like a sense of purpose or motivation to do something to fix it. That keeps like the energy high, and like have a sense of purpose to make it happen. And once the problem is resolved and I kind of finished or maybe finished it and I feel good, right? So I think in that way, how it, especially in nowadays, so many people are prone to depression. And I also know some friends who are, I think this kind of thing, where you start something, you have this problem, they just really feel really motivated. You can't wait to get onto it to solve it. And then once it's solved, you feel so good. And I think that kind of just, you know, on a very surface level, it's one way to, you know, overcome depression or a sense of even apathy, I think.
And that is what you call inspiration or in spirit.
Yeah, in spirit. Yeah.
You know, that's when you're in that zone.
Yeah.
You can't put it down.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bonnie. We've been an hour, so we have to wrap this up. I will, you know, show some of the paintings on the screen, and I'll include links to including that video about who I am and the God video in our show notes. So thank you so much for coming on my podcast. Can you tell people how they might connect with you?
Well, they can just go to bonnyhut.net, and all the info is there.
Yeah, and also a lot of if people want to dive into the rabbit hole and see all these weird things, they can certainly find it in your art. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you're also very knowledgeable and you're really well researched into a lot of the things. I just say a lot of the things.
I'll leave it at that. All right, thank you so much, Lucy.